Ali, 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 yeah. I praise Allah for these lessons. I'm striving to be the message, and I thank Allah for his blessings. Ali was the circle 7. I praise Allah for these lessons. I'm striving to be the message, and I thank Allah for his blessings. Ali was the circle 7. I praise Allah for these lessons. I'm striving to be the message, and I thank Allah for his blessings. Ali was the circle 7. I praise Allah for these lessons. I'm striving to be the message, and I thank Allah for his blessings. Ali was the circle 7. I praise Allah for these lessons. I'm striving to be the message, and I thank Allah for his blessings. Ali was the circle 7. I praise Allah for these lessons. I'm striving to be the message, and I thank Allah for his blessings. Ali was the circle 7.
Peace and love, family. Peace and love. Peace and love. Want to rise upon the 7. Give all praises to the great God, Allah, Father God, Allah, and honors to his holy prophet, honors to our holy prophet, Noble Drew Ali, El Hajj Sharif Abdul Ali, that is. We give honors to our Moorish kin once again, here, there, and everywhere, and therefore honors to all of you who are continuously honoring yourselves by being yourselves. We give honors to our Grand National Seal, Grand National Emblem, National Flag, Divine Constitution, and bylaws, and honors to all of you who are indeed a living manifestation and personification of everything that our holy prophet and the ancestors brought to make us a nation. I want to welcome you to another live stream. You know, this is a powerful measure. Want to give honors to Brother Noble Brian, always on the manifest, Sister Sakina Ra. We give honors to you, goddess and queen, for spreading your ma'atic wings in love, you know, and basically giving our people that truth and right, sister. You know, we got a grand measure to bring on the manifest. You know, we came out of the realm of meditation, and this was on my plate. So we want to share this with the family. Rosetta Stone on trial. Where's the primary source of decipherment? Champollion'S Coptic dictionary. And now it's finna be a powerful bill right here, family. You know, and what I'm gonna do from the onset, I'm gonna drop this link right here just in case our family want to join. You know, for questions, it's all good. Ain't no pressure over here. You know, we got nothing but sources and source material. And you know, we want to emphasize, since we're talking about sources, a lot of our people, you know, they talk about primary sources, but you know, they're also secondary sources. So really, Champollion'S Coptic dictionary, you know, where we consider it as a primary source in decipherment, it really would be a secondary source to, in the sense to where it's secondary to the Rosetta Stone itself, because that's what he claimed to have used as a tool. So, but Champollion is said to be the one to be the famed decipherer. So if he did this, then this would have to run hand in hand. You know, his particular dictionary would have to run hand in hand with the decipherment. You know, where's this dictionary to show proof that he actually deciphered it? That's what I'm emphasizing. You see, if we are going off of what Champollion supposedly used, which we know better. So we're going to do a lot of exposing, some measures. And I'm going to go in my bag and deal with some things that I actually supposed to been addressing, on SARS platform. And I'm going to give you a little taste of that right there. And I'm going to just address it right here. And I got some things I want to point out, because you have people that's constantly trying to ask the question, if the metadata has not been deciphered, then how do we come up with words such as commission? Well, we know the word commission don't exist in Rosetta. The word commission don't exist, in Rosetta, period. Commission is a word that's actually a combination of the word chemet, and then when we go into that aspect, the an aspect that's added on, that coming from English vernacular, so to speak. So also, if we were to deal with transliteration of any words to come forth, those words do not come from pictures. I'm sorry, the pictures are metaphysical. The pictures are allegorical. The pictures are esoteric. Now, I've been saying this for the whole while. I presented sources out here prior to the 19th century, meaning the time that your guy, Champollion, was said to have transliterated, deciphered, the language. Everybody prior to him taught that these things were symbolic. Everybody taught that these things were symbols. And there are many sources out here, and a lot of it right here in my information that I had to present to the family. So we're going to go over some of this where we have the time to go into it. But again, we're trying to cut things down. We want to lengthen up, the measure, as far as dealing with the volume of this, but we don't want to be too long drawn out. We're trying to break it down so our family can get it in increments, and also we can use our time to give many, many different measures, without running out, of our streaming time. So what I want to do is present to our family. I like to show y'all. I like to bring the sources. I don't like to just talk. That's one thing they can't never lie and say about me. I'm always bring you sources. Some things we get a little redundant, but I have a lot of things that I haven't even presented dealing with these things, because I've been waiting for somebody to come so I can get in my bag and really give them that business. But nobody really don't want to work, so we're going to present some things to the people. And we know that the opposition is peeking in. We know that they looking, got their head looking up from under the rock. And the link in the chat for anybody that want to get on here, Islam Consul General. Peace and love, family. Oh, man, we got our family from the UK watching us, man. If we got family in the United Kingdom watching us, then we already know that we reaching the people that we need to reach. It's only a matter of time for everybody to get this. This is going to be fulfilling, family. Again, our subject title is Rosetta Stone on Trial. Where's the primary source of decipherment? Champollion'S Coptic Dictionary. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe, family. Let the people know that we're giving this truth up over here. And this is coming from the Egyptian Adeptus Research Sultanate. Remember, the acronym of that is ears. You see, we hear, with our consciousness and not our literal ear. So that's a powerful measure. So let us get into this special measure. You often hear me speaking of, Champollion prior to him dealing with his so-called decipherment, that there were those who before him, prior to him, that actually taught on these symbols, and they taught from the metaphysical standpoint. They gave metaphysical interpretation. Many of you who seen me on Sarnetta recently, y'all seen me demonstrate that when they asked me, read this commission. And it's ignorant to ask me to read something when I keep telling the people I don't look at the symbols, as alphabet or sound. I look at the symbols in the sense of what we call metaphysics, formula, etc. And I've demonstrated those formulas and the metaphysics. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my strength, right here, because the strength is greater than the weakness that has come against me, and my strength is coming from these sources. I got strong sources over here, family. So let me do this right here. I'm going to share the whole of my screen, and I'm going to take y'all here. It's very important that y'all understand this document. This document dealing with the hieroglyphics of Horapollo of Neleus is not just any document. I want to give you some background on who Horapollo is. And Horapollo is actually a native-born Egyptian prior to the birth of Champollion. And we're going to see how he dealt, with the hieroglyphs. We want to read this preface right here real quick to give our family some background. I want you to listen to what's being said here and pay close attention. Hold up, let me see. I want to make sure I ain't going too far here because they actually have a shorter version of it. Okay, yeah, there we go. We'll start with what we was. If we want our family to hear this, I want y'all to hear this now. This is somebody that's prior to Champollion had already came forth demonstrating the work. In fact, Thomas Young, turned Champollion on to the works of Horapollo. So Champollion was very aware of Horapollo's work, and Horapollo's methods have proven to be true, you see, as well. So though they ended up discarding the works in the way that, the methodology that Horapollo demonstrated, later on, Champollion, did study these particular works. And then whatever he considered to not be consistent with his decipherment, later on it was accepted by, those who accepted his methodology that Horapollo was wrong. Mind you, Horapollo was an actual Egyptian priest born in Egypt now. He wrong, but Champollion right. Keep that in mind as we go through this. Because this document, though it presents the work of Champollion, not work of Champollion, but one that came before Champollion, this particular work also has a remix to it. It's not the original document in totality of what Horapollo brought forth. This is somebody translating this work into a whole nother language, but it's giving you the variants of what was left, or what they have. And, they had the original source, wherever it is, wherever they're hiding it right now, who knows? But listen to this. I want y'all to listen to this. It says, for some years past, an ardent spirit of inquiry has been awakened with regard to interpretation of the hieroglyphics inscribed upon the monuments of Egypt. For ages, these had been looked upon as depositories to which had been committed the religion, arts, and sciences of a nation once preeminent in civilization. Attempts, let me roll this up here a little bit. Attempts had been continually made to penetrate the darkness, but without the slightest success, till the great discovery of Dr. Young kindled the light with which the energetic and imaginative genius of Champollion and the steady industry and zeal of his fellow laborers and successors have illustrated almost every department of Egyptian antiquity and rendered the religion and arts and manners of that country almost familiar to us as those of Greece and Rome, and revived the names and histories of long forgotten pharaohs. So we know that this is one, though he is dealing with the works of Horapollo, this is also one that is favoring the translations, that Champollion came with later. You see, you got to keep that in mind. All that plays a part in this. This is why I say you deal with a balance of accepting truth and falsehood strangely mixed to a certain degree. Now, those who have done the research, know that Dr. Young or Thomas Young actually did more work than Champollion. Champollion, work that's supposed to be used by the people now, actually usurped the work of Thomas Young, and Champollion's work wasn't even really complete, so to speak. But yet we consider Champollion's work supposed to be deciphered. That's what this modern people, and I'm saying we, not in aspect of dealing with me, I'm just talking about the people in this new era and time, so to speak. But listen to what it says. It says the ill success of every previous attempt may in great measure be attributed to the scanty remnants of Egyptian literature that had survived and the neglect into which the sacred writings of Egypt had fallen. That's the key right there. The neglect into which the sacred writings of Egypt had fallen. At the time when Eusebius and several of the fathers of the Christian church turned their attention to antiquity, the ravages, and this is where it get good, listen well, family. The ravages of the Persians had scattered and degraded the priesthood of Egypt. We already know about this. What happened to the priesthood, right? It says the sole depositories of its learning, right? It says, but the fostering, it say, care of the Ptolemies reinstated them to splendor and again established learning into its ancient seat. So they are giving credit to the Ptolemies. You see? So now you can see that this author is also in favor of that background. But this author going to reveal some special things here that's going to expose, what really happened, especially when they go to showing certain things dealing with, Horapollo's transliteration, so to speak, or I would call metaphysical interpretations. Same thing that they try to say Commission is pseudo from now. Mind you, Horapollo, the author of this work, was an Egyptian priest. So who would you think would be more right for to go with? The Egyptian priests that came with their methodology that was actually part of the priesthood? Or do you think that it would be some Frenchmen that come later that didn't even use, the methodology of this priest, even though he admitted that a lot of his interpretation were right? So if he interpreted these things without the decipherment key that Champollion used, then how was he correct? And he was using metaphysical or allegorical interpretations. How was he correct if his expression was before the Rosetta Stone ever dealt with decipherment? So if they giving credence to saying that he was correct, then his methodology had to be correct before Champollion did what he did. So in other words, they should have kept going with the methodology that Champollion had already, that Horapollo had already been demonstrating, right? So now watch this. And I'm just checking to see if our family had hit the link. That way I can let somebody in if they do. So it goes on and it says, the cultivation of the sacred literature and the knowledge of hieroglyphics continued through the whole of the Greek dynasty, although the introduction of alphabetic writing was tending gradually to supersede them. So what this is saying is that the knowledge of hieroglyphics was still on the manifest through the whole of the Greek dynasty, but there was an introduction of alphabetic writing that gradually superseded. This tells you that if the alphabetical writing gradually superseded what was demonstrated in the pictorials, that the pictorials was not in alphabetic writing originally. That right there let you know right there. I'm going to say it again. The cultivation of the sacred literature and knowledge of the hieroglyphics continued through the whole of the Greek dynasty. That's why Horapollo was able to give his measure. That's this particular work here. Although the introduction of the alphabetic writing was tending gradually to supersede them. If it was already an alphabet, then how can it be superseded by an alphabet? Make it make sense. See? Alphabetic writing came later. You see? The pictorial writing existed all the way back since the time our people had been building things in ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt. You see? So when you hear us talking about them Champollion creating his particular measure, we ain't talking about him creating no alphabet as far as dealing with the ancient Egyptians. The chart, we saying he created his own chart outside of, what it was our ancestor was demonstrating. And this is the first time our people had a key that they would use to try to decipher something. We're going to get into the the real details of this and show you how this is done. So again, it says, on the Roman domination and upon the diffusion of Christianity, they further declined. But the names of Roman emperors are found inscribed in hieroglyphic characters. It says down to the close of the 2nd century, that of Commodus being believe, or we believe, the latest that appears. So now this comes, under what they demonstrate during the Ptolemaic period. So this is showing you that under the Romans, when they invented their alphabet, they are telling you around this same time, they came up with, different names or inscriptions of the Ptolemies and Cleopatra, because these are things that Champollion was supposed to so-called decipher, right? But he did this based upon what they call a Greek alphabet. Didn't have nothing to do with, the ancestors, which he basically had superimposed after coming forth from study with Coptic, because we know Greek is really a derivative of Coptic. What they like to call Greek alphabet, it just have a few less alphabets in it. You see? And they lied to you and told you and say, well, the Greek came first and it gave birth to the Coptic. How? When Coptic was one of the last forms of Egyptian writings. You see? So if Coptic was one of the last form of Egyptian writings, then how did Greek supersede that? Make it make sense, people. We know everybody took from what is called today Coptic and created different alphabetical charts off of that. But prior to that, you had Demotic, you had Hieratic, and these are their own languages. They are not Coptic. So what you have now today in front of you that they like to speak of in regards to dealing with Medu-Neter, it is assumed to be based upon what they found on the stone. And that stone was created by the Ptolemies themselves. So go figure. So if they had created, a particular measure where they had characters, dealing with the so-called Greek alphabet or whatever the case may be, and we say so-called because we already know all of these things are offshoots from what our people brought forth, you still can't confuse that with the original hieratic, because there was no hieratic on the Rosetta Stone, mind you. So how can you use anything on the Rosetta Stone to try to, deal with something hieratic? You see, although they do apply certain measures, out of certain aspects and try to superimpose them. Certain scholars have did this. We're exposing everything they did. So anyway, I'm going to go forth a little bit more. It says, at the beginning of the 5th century, Horapollo, a scribe of the Egyptian race and native, it says, of Phaneabitis, right, attempted to collect and perpetuate in volume before us, then, it says, the then remaining but fast fading knowledge of the symbols inscribed upon monuments. Now, Horapollo did this not with no alphabet chart. Horapollo did this by mere interpretation of the symbols, which attested the ancient grandeur of his country, not Champollion country. So you going to listen to the native-born priest, or you going to listen to Champollion? That's going to be your choice. Which of one of those that's your choice. What are you going to do? Which one you going to listen to? Champollion, or, what you going to do? So, when it come down to it, family, that's the question that you got to ask yourself. That's your choice. We ain't going to try to force you to believe nothing. We're going to give you the truth, though. So it says, this compilation was originally made in Egyptian language. Watch this. In Egyptian language, it was originally made. This work that I'm getting ready to read to you. But, everything that come after that right there supersede what was said before. A translation of it into Greek by Philip has alone come down to us in a condition very far from satisfactory. meaning they wasn't even really satisfied, because they're saying even though this work we have in us give us some insight, it's not satisfactory enough. So again, look at what they say. This compilation was originally made in the Egyptian language, but a translation of it into Greek has alone come down to us. And this is what has happened to a lot of the teaching that we have. Things get lost in translation. In this case, a lot of the metaneta, is getting lost, in Greek translation, and then it get lost again in Eurocentric translation. So we in a real bad situation. So that made me say, well, if the compilation was originally made in the Egyptian language, where is the Egyptian version? Huh? See, we got to pay attention to these details. And then you'll understand why your brother Commission say what he say. And we have another so-called remix in front of us. But listen to what it says. It says, from the internal evidence of the work, we should judge Philip to have lived a century or two later than her Apollo. So they're saying a century or two later than her Apollo. So he wasn't even doing the time. It's somebody coming again after a priest. And at the time when every remnant of actual knowledge of the subject must have vanished. It says, and they admitting this right here just between the point between him and him. So think about Champollion trying to decipher something that existed thousands of years before him. If they can see that type of logic of Philip not being exactly accurate, in what he getting ready to present in his translation of Ho Apollo after it done been lost in the translation of Greekism, we have to take it with a grain of salt, unfortunately. But one thing that we can be resting sure of, Ho Apollo, in his intent, according to this document, was not looking at the symbols as alphabets. Ho Apollo was looking at these symbols, in a metaphysical or symbolical form. You see? And he is not the only one that demonstrated. I got works on other priests that was demonstrating the same way that a lot of our people don't know about. So these priests would be a consensus, on this particular methodology, the same one that we use, here, amongst ourselves, the same one you seen me demonstrate on Sarnetta's show. Think about it, family. When you try to make a symbol, an alphabet, you putting it in a box. But if the symbol represents a formula, a metaphysics, it has multiple expression and definition that can be given it. So you're doing it a disservice when you try to make a symbol a letter. You see? Anyway, it says, I would have respected more if they would have just gone ahead and created Greek, documents and then told you that's what it was, than to try to act like they was demonstrating chematology. I would have respected Champollion them greater, if they wouldn't have tried to deceive the masses. So the Rosetta Stone is on trial right now. But we want to know what Champollion's dictionary is. See, y'all didn't even know he had none. Without his dictionary, we ain't got no proof of what it was that he so-called used to decipher. Because his dictionary was what he was supposed to use now. Why haven't we received that? Where's that, people? So it says, he moreover expressly professed to have embellished the second book by the insertion of the symbols in the hieroglyphics which Ho Apollo had omitted to introduce, and appears to have extended his embellishments also to the first book. Nevertheless, there is no room to doubt but that greater portion of the hieroglyphics and interpretations given in that book, it says, as well as some few in the second book, are translated from the genuine work of Ho Apollo, so far as Philip understood it, but in all those portions of each chapter which pretend to assign a reason why the hieroglyphics have been used to denote a thing signified, we think the illustrations of Philip may be detected. So in other words, you'll be able to separate the work of Ho Apollo from what Philip brought in him. His little additions to the measure, his little things that he sprinkled in here. So it says, in the first stages of hieroglyphical interpretation, notice they say interpretation, this work afforded no inconsiderable light but upon the whole, it is scarcely received the attention which it may justly claim as the only ancient volume entirely devoted to the task of unraveling the mystery in which Egyptian learning has been involved. Now, if Horapollo was a priest and he was born of the Egyptian aspect, why did he have the thought to interpret things symbolically? Why didn't he use the alphabet methodology that Champollion came up with later? You see, me and Horapollo see things the same way from what I see. And not only that, even the way that we teach it in the Moorish paradigm, because we teach that Yehoshua as a neophyte, when he went into Egypt, the one you know as Isa, Jesus, according to our history, he was told by the Hierophant to sit in the chambers and look at the hieroglyphics and ponder upon their meaning. He wasn't given no alphabet chart. He was told to think upon their meaning. The same thing that Horapollo is said to be doing in this work. So that's why you see us demonstrating the way we do, because that's the methodology that we demonstrate according to the Egyptian adept methodology that has been passed down to us in our Moorish Holy Quran. And it's in more than one spot. I'm going to show that to you in a minute too. It says, in the present edition of the work, where any interpretations have been ascertained to be correct, the chapter has been illustrated by the corresponding hieroglyphic. In those cases where the hieroglyphic is mentioned, but in an incorrect interpretation assigned, engravings have been given of it, as well as the hieroglyphic corresponding to such interpretation, wherever these have been ascertained, and they have been inserted in hope that they may lead persons, it says, better acquainted with the subject to discover more accurate meanings than we have been able to suggest. And a lot of this is they trying to correct Horapollo with what they know of what Champollion came with later. So this is somebody that looking at Champollion, you know, as his methodology, but they trying to tell you about what Horapollo was doing. In other words, they trying to find justification, you know, to debunk what Horapollo did while at the same time acting like they're giving honor to it. You see what I'm saying? I don't know about nobody else, but I'm going with the Egyptian priests. I'm going with Horapollo over Champollion. I'm telling you that from the beginning. It says, among the engravings is inserted a complete pantheon of the great gods and goddesses of Egypt. Kim, of whom is Osiris, it says, is a form and is the great deity corresponding to the Indian Siva, and the Pluto of the Greeks of Ptah. So they trying to add this Greekism off in here, right? Of whom Horus is another form, and is the Indian Brahma, and Greek Apollo, which is Hnep, which is the counterpart of Vishnu. And then you have Jupiter, which is Isis. They're basically saying that these different deities from these different belief systems, they all took their particular measure and came forth and created something, but it all go back to Kemet, like we always say all the time. You know, these are their versions of the Kemetic Neteru, basically. That's what they're saying. So it goes on with a counterpart of Vishnu, of Jupiter, Isis, you know, of Vesta, Hathor, of Venus, you know, and Neith, of Minerva, and Thoth, of whom Anubis is another form, and is the origin of Mercury. So this is their comparing in their teachings, you know, as it comes to them through the Alexandrian interpretation. We know that they learn from our people. We know it really ain't no such thing as Greek philosophy or Greek language or Greek culture. Our brother G.M. James told you that in Stolen Legacy. How can you call it Greek philosophy when the people that was killed, these Greek philosophers that was killed for promoting it, you know, they was demonstrating that. So why would the Greeks then promote it as Greek philosophy if they disagreed with it, if they was killing people for teaching? You see what I'm saying? Make it make sense. I give honors to G.M. James for making that point and raising that, you know, logic. You're going to kill somebody for teaching Greek philosophy. Then next thing you know, you praising them, or you praising the Greek philosophy, when all of them really honored Kemet. All them people that went through Kemet and learned and went through the school, Plato, Aristotle, Thales, all of them, they all gave honors to the teacher. It's the European that came later and seen a way, to say, all right, this is our way to act like we ancient, y'all. So we gonna give praise to these ones like they created the science. It says, in this edition, the best text that could be found has been adopted, and in no instance has any imitation been hazarded without express authority, and our own suggestions have throughout been inserted in the notes or within the parentheses. It says, and at the end will be found an index of the author's manuscripts referred to, it says, as well as the celebrated passages of Porphyry and Clemens relating to the hieroglyphical interpretation. These are other individuals. Porphyry and Clemens of Alexandria were actually of the agreement that these things were symbolic. You see, these things were not meant to be taken, as no alphabets. This is the consensus of the people. It says, the Lord of Proto, it said, at whose request and expense this work has been completed, by whom also a very considerable part of the illustrations has been furnished, I beg to return my most sincere thanks. It says, to Sir Gardner Wilkins's published works, I am much indebted, pardon self, it says, as well as to his assistance in the progress of the work. Also to the kindness of Messrs. Burton, Bonamy, Sharp, Birch. These are all of your people that had some hand in trying to, progress in the ancient Kemetic teaching, Egyptian teaching. And they all have particular portions that they put together, and then came up with what they call Egyptology. All of them had their own particular special field they worked in, which is what we should be doing. Ain't nobody came together. There's not been a council yet among our brothers and sisters. They want to be lazy and accept what these Europeans demonstrated. And that's why I be on their head. If you really love Kemet, then why you ain't trying to transliterate from the original paper then? You don't even want to learn the hieratic. And yet at the same time claim that you Kemetic. You see? So that means you are dependent upon Eurocentric works that are really outdated. And we here right now bringing you the modern and updated expression. And you want to go in opposition. Even though you ain't studied this stuff right here that I'm studying over here. You studied what you studied, but you ain't studied like I studied. And that's why you can't debunk what I'm saying. And so you rather call it pseudo, and wish it away, but you can't wish it away. Because I'm on their head, and if you defending them, I'm on your head too. So let me go forward. It says, for more convenient reference, I have generally cited Mr. Sharp's vocabulary, in which are comprised in a condensed form almost all the established discoveries of his predecessors. It says the edition of Hor Apollo by D. Lummis, it says, has afforded some illustrations, and several of the various readings subjoined, and it is with great pleasure that the reader is referred to that work for almost every passage in ancient authors which has any bearing upon the subject. The kindness of Mbonmi, it says, in executing designs for all the engravings of Mr. J.A. Corey for the frontispiece, it says, in plates at the end, I beg with many thanks to acknowledge, and Mr. I.P. Corey, I am indebted for much assistance throughout the whole progress of the work, both in the translation and the notes, and in furnishing many of the illustrations and elucidations of some of the very obscure passages that occur, it says, throughout the work, and also for the labor of correcting much of the press, which he undertook for me while unavoidably engaged in other pursuits. In conclusion, I beg to state that upon myself must rest the responsibility of all the errors and deficiencies in the work, which I feel convinced cannot but be many. He's saying the same thing that E. Wallace Bud was saying. Like, he know that it was some errors in what he demonstrated in his trans. So this is why I'm saying it. But you got some people take what these people say, as the gospel truth. At least he got the sense enough to admit that he got some errors in here. So that leave the people room for doing more research. But I want to find the original Egyptian papyrus. You see, it says, I trust, however, that they will in general be found comparatively unimportant. And this is Pembroke College, 1840. You see, Horapollo. And notice what it says here. There you go. They go to Greek. He told you that he put this Greek in here, but it was originally Egyptian. Watch what it say here. It says, the hieroglyphics of Horapollo, Nilius, which he published in the Egyptian tongue, and which Philip translated into the Greek language. That's the same methodology that was demonstrated with all of the teaching, that come from, these Europeans. Same thing with Champollion too. So it says NB. It says the inverted commas in the text denote the parts which have been already recognized in the hieroglyphics, and the italics, it says between the text and the notes refer to the hieroglyphical illustration. We ain't gonna go through this whole book. We just gonna show you some examples that Horapollo, demonstrated. So he was speaking here on how the ancient Egyptians denoted eternity. And so you see he has, the ruler here, the Nisut, our priest, or whatever the case may be, the hymnetta, if you want to call him that. But then he has the cobra here, which is often referred to as the Uraeus. Then you have the serpent. He's not looking at this as an alphabet like most people have been taught. These are symbols. Now you can see they definitely translated this in the Greek first. This is not the original, version. We know that Greek is a derivative of what Coptic is, just minus a few alphabets, what they call Greek anyway. But it says to denote eternity, they depict the sun and the moon because their elements are eternal. But when they would represent eternity differently, right? It says they delineate a serpent, which is the tail covered by the rest of its body. The Egyptians call this Uraeus, which in the Greek language signifies the basilisk. It says, and they place golden figures of it. It say round the gods. The Egyptians say that eternity is represented by this animal because of the three existing species of serpents. The others are mortal, but this alone is immortal because it destroys any other animal by merely breathing upon it, even without biting. And hence, inasmuch it say, as it thus appears to have power over life and death, they place it upon the head of the god. And they're really talking about when he spew that venom out, that cobra, they can really kill their prey like that right there. But at the end of the day, you see it has the Greek text over here. So this is the real deal right here, family. This ain't just somebody writing, but it's a secondary expression because it's not the original Egyptian. You see what I'm saying? So they use this methodology, and this is before your boy Champollion come on the man. So all he really did is took a different approach and used this same alphabet, in comparative to the Coptic. Being Coptic was one of the last stages of what is called Egyptian, and then he came up with his own alphabet based upon that, comparing a Coptic alphabet to symbols. I'm going to show you that in a minute. But this is a symbolic interpretation. This ain't got nothing to do with no letters up here. Now one of these symbols represent letters, and then it goes into the different works of, the Europeans as well, showing the head of the one, the eternal power, the representation of that, the serpent. Even in most esoteric knowledge today, the serpent biting upon his tail has become a symbol of universal knowledge. The serpent, metaphysically represents the universe. You see, the serpent also metaphysically represents the energy in the universe. If you ever seen the creation cosmology, they talk about a pep, being the serpent that was wrapped around the egg and so forth and so on. See, all this stuff is metaphysical, family. That ain't the only one that he deal with in interpretation like that. You see what I'm saying? But it goes on and then he go further. It says again, this is showing you again, reiterating. It says when they would represent the universe, they delineate a serpent bespeckled with variegated scales. And them really represent the stars. They would be the symbol of the stars. It says devouring its own tail by the scales. It says intimating the stars. You see? So it says that, in other words, it's imitating. It says these stars. It says, and in the universe, right? It says the animal is also extremely heavy. It says, as is the earth, and extremely slippery, like the water. Moreover, it said, it every year puts off its old age with its skin, as the universe in the annual period of effects. It says, corresponding change and becomes renovated. And the making use of its own body for food implies that all things whatsoever that are generated by divine providence in the world undergo a corruption into it again. So this is talking about the constant process of creation, and a destroying process, creation of matter destroyed. In other words, like seasons. We see the creation flourish during the springtime, and we see creation go into a symbolic demise during, the fall season. You see, autumn season, right? And that's why right here they said the figures of the god Atumul sometimes exhibit the instances of the serpent with its tail in its mouth. So all these different little esoteric schools of thought that demonstrate that symbol with the serpent with the tail in his mouth. I'm gonna show you real quick. Let me see here. And this act part and said, there is no religion hiding truth. I can type that in and give you the symbol on it. They have many because everybody demonstrated. It ain't just this one right here. You see, if you notice here, this symbol in a lot of these different bodies that demonstrate what they like to call New Age philosophy, the symbol of the serpent devouring its tail. Notice the swastika, which is actually a symbol of revolution, movement, planetary alignment, described here in this Apollo demonstration. We even had a symbol, as well when it comes to dealing with the ancient expression of the symbol of the scimitar above the star. You see, when you deal with the pentagrammaton. So anyway, it goes on. Perhaps the nearest known approximation to the text is the serpent running around the lid of the sarcophagus of Ramesses III, one of my great ancestors, right, at Cambridge, which rests his head upon his tail, may indicate the universe. So, they keep going. They tell you that the year, a year was represented by this particular symbol. And if you know anything about time, this is He. That's what they would call it. But it says when they would represent the year, and we can't go over the fact too that when a snake, sheds its scales, they compare that to the universe as well, going through its annual cycle. So these are deep things. I encourage you to read this. There's another version of this too that show you the origin on how the Proto-Sinaitic or the Proto-Canaanite alphabet that the Hebrew used come into existence. I got another book on that here. The influence on that. So let me see. I may be able to pull it up right here. Let me see. All of these old books like this, family, they definitely here too. They are here online. You can get them. You can get them for free. You see? Let me see if it let me pull that one up. I think it might be this one here. This is another book right here. I didn't want to download it. Yeah, this is another book that's showing the comparisons. And this is actually McCoy Publishing Company, Masonic. It says Egyptian symbols of the Egyptian symbols compared to those of the Hebrews. The principle of symbology. And so they talking about symbolic language and all that here, and you're going to see them in this particular book. They base this work off of Horapollo's work. And they showing you that a lot of the symbolism that was demonstrated in Horapollo's work, the same thing was demonstrated, when it come to dealing with, the application of these symbols. See, so Horapollo was that guy, like they gave a symbol of the bee, and they say the bee was a symbol of an obedient people because, says Horapollo, it alone of all animals had a king. So now when you see the symbol of the beehive in masonry, and they talk about the worker bee and the colonies doing what they're doing, and they try to compare that to their little secret society and so forth and so on, they getting this from Champollion, who actually spoke on it at a time where he was demonstrating the work of Horapollo. See, Horapollo said this first, and then Champollion gives to the bee the signification of the king being an obedient people. So he didn't come up with nothing new. Horapollo had already said this. Looked like he was plagiarizing some things here and there. But anyway, they go to show you the connection of this to different letters, that came later. The Horapollo translation, how the Hebrews began to demonstrate their measure. Ain't got nothing to do with interpretation. There's symbolic meaning to these Hebrew letters is basically what they're showing. But this work too, I want to go back so y'all have this. You can go and get these things and go side by side with them. But this is dealing with symbolism. 1903 is when it was published. And then you have, they had the author on here. Look like they actually going to the one who they just looking at the those who published it in their lodge. It should have had it on there. But just know it's a comparison of Egyptian symbols, with those of the Hebrew alphabet. And this was their comparison, right? This is what they was doing in their own research. They did basically what your boy did, Champollion did. You see? So let me drop this link in here again. So I want to cover this before I go into what I'm saying about Champollion, so y'all will know when I say that it was originally metaphysics being demonstrated, you see it. And it's more than these books. You see, it's more than these books. These are, the particular books, that we have on the manifest now just to show you, but that's what it is. Go in them. All these ancient books can be found mostly at Google Books, family. Google Books. If you go to Google Books and you look for this stuff, that's how I find a lot of it. You see what I'm saying? So now what I'm going to do, let me go and get into the real aspects of what it is I'm demonstrating. I'm actually go to my PowerPoint that like I said, I was supposed to bring forth, on SARS demonstration. Let me see here. Okay, so, and I tell our people all the time, this is what you got to remember. The process by which Champollion them demonstrated was reverse engineered. And for those who don't know what reverse engineering is, it's something that's a crime right now. It's a different form of plagiarism, basically. But you take something, you find out how it worked, and then you recreate it in your own way. It's like taking a Nike shoe and then taking the swoosh off of it and turning it upside down, and selling the same shoe, but the swoosh on it is upside down. That's reverse engineering. That's an example. But it means to disassemble and examine and analyze in detail a product or device to discover the concepts involved in manufacture, usually in order to produce something similar. That's what the European did with, creating, the metanetta that they came up with as a language by making these into alphabets under the Ptolemaic period, as opposed to being symbolic measures. If you understand what each and every one of these items represent, you can give a symbolic interpretation to them, if you understand what these things are. So it says here, I said metanetta is the book of creation, aka metaphysical formulas, the Kemetic text of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So what I'm saying, dealing with metanetta, is way more advanced than what Champollion tried. He's just trying to simply say, this represents a letter A, this represents a letter B, this letter. No, I'm telling you, it's deeper information involved in this. And those who are fighting me on this, they claim to honor science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You see? Man, this is terrible. But anyway, let me go on. I'm going to show you, because we're dealing with this guy, Champollion. I'm going to show you something. Remember that term reverse engineered, because that's exactly what was demonstrated. I don't even want to go there right now. Not there. I'm going to go down here because I want to go right to your guy Champollion's work. Now that we done exposed that it was somebody that was teaching before him. And I reiterate this, though. I will go here. These are some of those other scholars that I was telling you that was teaching the true meaning of these symbols. And they tell you, and this is coming from this document, Tholuth, Egyptian Hieroglyphs, and Classical Works. This is prior to your boy Champollion coming on the manifest. It says, as a general rule, now I just demonstrated the methodology that Horapollo, an Egyptian priest, was demonstrating before Champollion ever come into existence. Y'all can pull that PDF up, and it got a whole lot more dealing with the symbolical interpretation. No alphabetical system. No alphabet chart in there. Just him going in. And they admitted, even Champollion admitted he got it right. So if he got them things right and then later say, okay, this wrong according to what I got on the manifest now. You know what I mean? You can't accept some of it is right and some of it is wrong because you choose to create your own methodology. You got to show some proof. So we want to see that original alphabet chart that have alphabets on it before the chart that Champollion created. We want to see the ancient Egyptians chart. If you can't show that, I'm talking about in hieroglyphics, letter for letter for a symbol. If you can't show it existing prior to, you're dealing with conjecture. Now, you may not want to admit that because you have spent your life thinking you was deciphering metanetta. But I'm sorry, you were not deciphering metanetta, family. You was dealing with a Ptolemaic system and their methodology. That's all I'm saying. That don't take nothing from the ancestors, because what I'm trying to give you to be able to look at these things as metaphysical, to be able to look at these things as mathematical formulas, I'm trying to take you into and I done demonstrated these formulas for y'all on numerous occasions. So I'm showing you how it works and how you can come into this knowledge and use it to actually heal your body. That's what Commission trying to teach. You can't heal the body just by saying, that's a letter E, that's a letter I, so I'm going deeper. That's my methodology. So again, it says, as a general rule, it may be said that none of the classical authors knew what they were writing about as far as hieroglyphs were concerned, although most of them, it say, may be more or less unconsciously tried to cover the ignorance with pompous cloak of learned philosophy and terminology. So these particular ones are in here quoting different books, right? But it says perhaps this statement is in some cases exaggerated. So he ain't agreeing with what's being said here. And it says we have seen that many ancient scholars have had access to testimonies from Egyptians who mastered the hieroglyphic rite, or at least knew the true meaning of several signs. They're going to make a distinction between written language and symbols. Is what I've been doing all the while. This is why I make those. This is because I have the documentation, family. I don't have to always put a source up here to tell you. I'm speaking off my head, but I can't do that. Most of them can come up against me, though, and say I'm wrong and have no proof. I know what I read. I know they think I'm just making this stuff up. I studied and read this stuff thoroughly for years. You see, it says, but it is true that most of these authors didn't have any peculiar knowledge about the function of this writing system. Thus, it is possible, it says, that thanks to some rhetorical methods, this ignorance was turned into a declared criticism of Egyptian writing system. De facto classical authors pointed out the defects, it says, of the Egyptian graphic system compared to their own scriptural practice. More, they imputed their ignorance of hieroglyphs, meaning to the Egyptian priests who jealously guarded the secrets of these signs. If the arcane, it says, of the hieroglyphic writing can't be grasped, it is both because of their enigmatic essence and because of the priests who refuse to surrender their knowledge that they guard for selfish reasons. You see? So he's talking about the people, that couldn't understand and comprehend, so they wanted to dismiss it. You know how somebody don't know the real background behind the subject, but want to act like they know. Like some of the people that I come up against, they act like they know this stuff, knowing good and well they ain't went into this aspect as deep as I have. As deep as they went in thinking they was trying to deal with some translate metal net, I was studying this side of it even deeper. So it says the Egyptian hieroglyphs is priest's prerogative, right? It says another glitch, and this is same source, same document, about Egyptian hieroglyphics or hieroglyphs can be seen in other authors' works. The idea that hieroglyphs would be a prerogative of a small part of the population, namely the priests, jealously keeping their secrets. Thus, Apuleius talks about rituals and bookkeeping, the magical mysteries of the priests from the uninitiated persons. So this is saying that they didn't give the metal netta in the symbolic form to everybody, anybody. They didn't teach that to each other, to every people, because these things had to do with formulas that you was able to use hecker, and you can hurt somebody basically, if you misuse it. So everybody didn't learn this. This was taught only to priests. It was passed from a father to a son. It was taught in family. You see what I'm saying? But it says, thereafter having celebrated and established the form of ritual, the temple opened, having executed the morning sacrifice, he, the priest, pulls from a hiding place at the bottom of the sanctuary some books where were drawn unknown characters, litteris ignorabilis. It says on the first ones, and animal figures modi animalium. So they had one that was dealing with actual alphabet form, and then one that was dealing with the animal form. All these different pictures, pictorials, anaglyphs is what we call them, of every kind, were the abridged expression of liturgical formulas. This is what they seen it as. The people in classic, they understood, and they was right. A lot of the symbols in metal netta have to do with what we call alchemy, family. And that is not taught to any and everybody. People know that most of these secret societies, in your Masonic orders, in Sufism and Kabbalah, all of these different teachings are not taught to the public as open doctrine when you get into dealing with alchemy, family. And so these symbols are alchemic formulas. That's what Brother Commission trying to tell y'all. And it takes more research than looking at them as a letter I, a letter E, a B, and a C, and just putting them in the box like Champollion's them wanted you to do. I'm trying to take you into the deeper knowledges of Kemet. But it ain't meant for everybody to get this either. You see, because some individuals will get this knowledge and try to misuse it or try to sell, their progress to somebody else and make money off our people like they've been trying to do with the hieroglyphics. See, commission here to expose them as frauds and charlatans. But quite often, the one that's bringing the truth is often, being seen as the magician or the one that is bringing pseudo information. And that's just what all of people that became prophetic figures had to deal with as well. Only a chosen few is able to tap into this information that I'm giving right now and see exactly what's being said. As far as the naysayers, we already know they're trying to fleece you. They want your money and all that right there. I'm trying to bring you out of slavery. I ain't trying to enslave my people with no information. So it says, on others, knobby, rounded lines in the shape of a wheel, retracting like vines, and they're describing alphabets, tendrils, shielded lecture of the text from the curiosity of the non-initiated. Right? So, it goes into, and they was actually quoting some of Apollo right here, showing when the Egyptians indicated God, that they draw a falcon, a god because it is a fecund animal with long life, and moreover because it seemingly is the representation of the sun because it can look at the sun rays sharper than any other bird. This is why physicians use the falcon's herb for eyes and healing. And this is why one sometimes depicts, the hierarchomorphic sun as the lord of the visual acuity. It says the falcon means, it says for them, the Egyptians, everything that goes fast, because this animal probably is the fastest bird. This idea is then transposed via metaphorical transfer to everything fast and everything linked to speed, as if we had used words. And so you see this symbol right here, which is the symbol of the Egyptian Adeptus Research Sultan. And you see the wings. You see the Heru bird. This is what we call our swift angel seal. That's why we adopted that, because that deals with the swiftness of Heru, the swiftness of spirit, and so forth and so on. But it says in the same way, Diodorus Siculus explains that the Egyptians have two particular kinds of writing. The first one called common, learned by everybody. That would be your hieratic that I'm trying to tell people. That's the real language of the Egyptians. That would be the Demotic that later come. Coptic, later evolved later. You see? It says the other one called sacred, only known by the priest and taught to them from father to son among secret things. You see? So one learned by everybody and one only taught from father to son. And sacred writing, y'all already know they talking about what they call hieroglyphs. Diodorus Siculus them taught this before Champollion come on the manifest. So they were in a consensus on this, agreeing with Apollo. These things are symbolic. It says, thus, in according a detailed attention to symbolic meanings present, it says, in every object, and exercising their mind by long practice and memorizing, they read in a row what is written. In other words, this is, like I told y'all, we talk about how Yehoshua, he went into a particular chamber and he was told to memorize, to call to mind, to contemplate. There's a couple of places in our Moorish Holy Quran where it said that when he was in Egypt, being taught by the Hierophant, this is what the Hierophant instructed him to do. He instructed him to find himself. And so he was put in that temple in darkness, with a little light that came through, piercing through that particular area, and told to think and ponder upon the meaning of the hieroglyphs. That's the same method we using. That's the same method they used to use before Champollion came up with his so-called Rosetta Stone decipherment. So whose method is more ancient? We dealing with one that come from Apollo. and the ones that our ancient ancestors. Apollo was a native born Egyptian. Champollion was a Frenchman. So who am I going with? I'm going with what correspond not only with the way that we are taught that we demonstrated, but I'm also going with those who came before Champollion. You see, I know it's hard for some of our people to accept this after being taught. You just think the metal netter looks so pretty, and it does. And that's why you caught up on that and you can't hear what I'm saying. I'm trying to take you into a greater expression and a greater love for these symbols outside of what the Europeans said. What is so hard for you to comprehend? So it says, through these lines, we understand that only a long practice and intense intellectual training allow knowledge of the key for reading hieroglyphs. Consequently, it seems obvious that the memorizing in Diodorus' text was reserved for an elite, given the time required for the realization of this learning process. You see, and then it goes on to quote, moreover, F.R. Dunant explains, and then it goes into, the other measures, where it says, I think that this was what the Egyptian wise men have understood to refer to things with wisdom. They don't draw letters, meaning use no alphabet, which they developed themselves in discourse and clauses, which represent sound and spoken words. They draw images, each one being a picture of a distinct thing. Each engraved sign is a science, a wisdom, a real thing understood in a single time. See, they're telling you, this is the consensus of the scholars before Champollion. They didn't use no letters, people. They looked at the symbols in a symbolic, metaphysical way. I want to explain the theological mode of the Egyptians. Indeed, they imitate the universal nature, the divine creation, when they produce symbolical copies of a mystical and intellectual things hidden and invisible. In the same way, nature expressed in a symbolical manner the invisible reasons by apparent forms, and that divine creation sketches the truth of ideas by visible copies. They're talking about reading the book of creation, family. And if you read the book of creation, this is what we call observation of phenomena. Therefore, it is a science. Science deals with observing phenomena. So to truly read Medu Neter, look around you. You ain't even got to go to chemistry. Look at the nature of the tree. Look at the seasons. Look at cosmology. Look at astrology. This is the deepness behind it. You can tap into this in the formulas of this. Then you can tap into the real use and the relevance of those pictorial expressions. You get it? It says, as for the countless symbolical figures called hieroglyphs, right? It says it is the ancient authority of the original wisdom which made them knowable. While the Israelites were still sojourning in Egypt, Moses was born, and being reared in the palace of the Egyptian king, was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. Having also from his own observations accepted the sphere and made himself acquainted with astronomy, or even with magic and hieroglyphic letters, it says, or I should rather say the symbols of letters, as for yet letters were unknown. So anybody want to take the source and say he said letters, they letting you know letters were unknown. These are symbols of what they now call letters. Huh? So start reading the book of creation, and then you can become a true Egyptian priest. So it says nature, an idea that was held into the decipherment of this writing system, as they want to call it, more than 2 millennia, thus around the 4th centuries of Herodotus, say in Egypt, we read, again, Diodorus Siculus' work. Nevertheless, we must talk about this kind of writing which Egyptians call sacred hieroglyphs. Indeed, in their writing, this is not the arrangement of syllables which convey the idea to express, but a metaphorical meaning linked to objects that are copied and transpositioned and etched into memory by long exercises. Likewise, Tactius, another one, wrote at the beginning of the 2nd century AD, the first ones Egyptians used animal figures, figures animatium to represent ideas, sensus mentis. These monuments, the oldest of human history, still can be seen engraved on stone. We can also quote Plotinus of the 3rd century, Iamblichus of the 4th century, uh, Ammonaeus, also Marcellius of the 4th century, and Cosmas in the Kleptitis. They got some crazy names, when you deal with these people. But all these are those who believe the same thing, that these are metaphorical. But when Commission tell them, these things are meant to be metaphysically explained, key, ha, 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 he say metaphysical. You are arrogant in your own ignorance is what you are. Just because you wasn't taught this right here, and you ain't did the research, you believe it ain't true. You see? But he who has ears to hear and a heart to sympathize, let him. So let me see if anybody may be trying to get in here, because I'm going in over here. If it is somebody, okay, ain't nobody there. You see? So, okay, we got our family say, can the hieratic be read and understood? Yes, it can. We're going to get into that in a second. Because the hieratic, on the other hand, is actually the precursor to demotic. And demotic is the precursor to what they call hecopta. You see? So, our sister said, why am I whispering? Oh, man, it might be your phone, sister. I'm pretty sure that our family, let me get a confirmation, though, as I move on, because nobody ever said that before you, Queen, that the mic was low. Let me get a confirmation. Can anybody else out there hear me clearly? Because it might be our sister phone, because I think they would have probably told me as well. Because I'm really going in right here. Okay, so our family say they can hear. Okay, we okay. So, all right, all is well. Yeah, that might be your phone. We give honors to your sister Freedom for checking in. Oh yeah. All right. So yeah, so all of our family that's listening, I just gave you many sources, and these are classical sources that's telling you this. Now, whether one choose to continue to go the way they're going, hey, I ain't trying to convince you to do nothing different. My duty is to convey the message. Now I'm finna show you what Champollion did. I'm finna give you his background, his MO. And there's certain things you have to look at too. Let's go into E. Wallace Budge, for instance. I honor E. Wallace Budge because he was an honest man. He'll tell you this. Listen to what he said. He said the professional copyists of the Book of the Dead and the monastic scribes who laboriously transcribed Coptic, he wasn't the one that did it. These were people that was actually native to the land, and that's the same thing was going on with Champollion. There was a Coptic priest that he was learning from, and he took him with him to Egypt. You see, the one time he went, it says Syriac, Arabic, and Ethiopic texts in Egypt, Ethiopia, and Syria made many mistakes. Now, y'all do know Champollion did his transliteration too, without going at first to Kemet. A lot of people don't know that. But he says, made many mistakes, misspelt words of the archetypes of their copies, omitted whole lines. And we see this in the paper where they took certain things out. It says it made nonsense of many passages by omitting parts of words and mixing together the remaining parts. It seems to me obvious from these facts that everyone who undertake a long, very tedious work, like the making of an Egyptian dictionary, must be guilty of the perpetration of mistakes, blunders, and errors in his copying. However careful he may be, in my work there will be found inconsistencies, misunderstandings, and misprints. You got to give it to him. At least he being honest. But you got people out here trying to tell you that these things are the end all be all, and they telling you that it's mistakes and probably downright misstatements. You see? But then he said, notwithstanding such defects, I hope and believe that this dictionary will be useful. You see what I'm saying? To the people that's basically going into his work. He tell you right here, he said, I have not copied. He was speaking on where it says, following the meaning of the word at the end of the entry is often given the equivalent of an Egyptian word in the later stage of the language. So what we have in front of us, family, from Champollion is solely based off the Coptic, which is a descendant of the Demotic. The Demotic is a descendant of the Hieratic, but the Coptic is the Coptic. It's not the Demotic or the Hieratic. You know, is a change in these things. You see? So you can't just make the Coptic be that which is solely used to try to decipher something that's ancient. You deal with Coptic as you deal with Coptic. Coptic more relates to Demotic and Hieratic than it does those pictures. And that's how it should be applied. And that's why we have, be able to say Keprabito, or we able to say Kemet, because it's dealing with these Coptic measures. It ain't got nothing to do with no pictures that they are applying or superimposing, upon these alphabets. That's what I'm trying to show you. And I'm going to show you in a minute. You can do that any way you want to and create your own alphabet with symbols and pictures. And it's going to come out, the same way. But it say, I have not copied them straight out of a Coptic dictionary, but have satisfied myself that they bear the meaning which the Egyptian words have in passages in the Coptic versions of the Bible. So biblical tools were being used, and it's a lot of biblical words in E. Wallace Bud's dictionary. You'll find the word, that goes into the word Yah. You see Ayah, which connects back to the word Jah. You'll see that in there. They even give you the Hebrew equivalent to it. It says, and in Coptic patristic literature generally, it says, had the great corpus of Coptic words, which Mr. W.E. Crum has been at work for so many years and been available, a number of Coptic equivalents quoted in this dictionary would probably, it says, have been quadrupled. The Hebrew, Syriac, Arabic, and other Semitic words quoted in the entries stand in a different relationship to the Egyptian, for they merely represent borrowings of words usually by the Egyptians from Semites, whereas the true Coptic words of native Egyptian. They seem to me to stand in quite different category from the pronouns, it says, which were borrowed at very early period by the Egyptians from the people, whom for want of better name we may call Proto-Semites. So, he go in, he even tell you the concept when people talk about determinatives and all that stuff right there. He talk about how he had the letter E, where there are no consonants, in the original text, he put the letter E in there. That's why you see hetep. That comes from, an adapted measure of Budge and a couple of more Egyptologists. He said, among the words given in this dictionary are many which are derived from Demotic texts in his dictionary. So Demotic text is the language that came after Hieratic. As my knowledge of this branch of Egyptology is rudimentary, meaning he don't know everything about it, I have relied for the correctness of their transcription into hieroglyphs, chiefly upon the works of erratic genius. Guesswork. He was going for what he know, basically. It says E.R. Revelant and Professor of F.L. Griffith, these scholars have shown that the demontologists are able to transcribe Demotic texts into hieroglyphs, and that is reverse engineering, family. They took Demotic language and then they transcribed them into pictorials. They wasn't originally pictorials, and they did the same thing later with hieratic. And that's how they came up with their fake, fiend, fraudulent, so-called decipherment. Y'all don't go this deep, so y'all can't see what's being said. You're only looking at what they showed you and what has been widely accepted as the truth. I've dug deep into this. It says in Birch's view, it says that they were unable to do this is no longer tenable about the correctness and the meanings of many demotic words, and given by them can no doubt for be equivalents of a great number of them, and their counterparts in the form are to be found even in the existing Coptic scale. This is why your boy Champollion was talking about dealing with Coptic. This is why he was talking about demotic. He didn't deal with no hieratic. So it says, now look, if you can see the different orders of the alphabet that they created when they came up with the pictorials, these are different orders of the alphabet. They all had their own order. It's 3 different orders of the alphabet right here. You see, that was created by different Egyptologists. You see? It says, now the exact meaning of many words is unknown and can only be guessed at by the context. So how you going to really compile something if things can only be guessed at and they are unknown? At least E. Wallace Budge is admitting this, though. And you got people trying to defend his document and his doctrine, and he telling you that there's some things in there wrong. He was guessing. In some cases, the context makes the meaning of an unknown word comparatively certain, but in others, especially where there is no probable Coptic equivalent is forthcoming, it does not. And then any meaning suggested is little else than the result of guesswork. In many cases, then, English words that are set down as translations of rare and difficult Egyptian words must only be regarded as suggestions as to the probable meanings. So these are suggested, translations. So it says the meaning of some of them is tolerably clear from the determinatives, but there are a considerable number of words in these difficult documents for which no one has so far proposed meanings that may be considered correct. And now he came after Champollion, and he's telling you that some of these things are guesswork, some of them incorrect misstatements. The spells and the magical formulae which abound these texts are not only difficult to translate because of words unknown meaning in them. That's the protection of the ancestors, so nobody can tap into that technology and be trying to misuse it. But also because it is not always clear where one word ends and the next begins. Even Maspero found himself unable to translate whole sentences and passages in them. And as none of the translations of them promised German scholars has yet appeared, it seems as though the difficulties which they belittled in describing Maspero's addiction of the pyramid text have vanquished them. You see? So, like family, even me in dealing with certain things going into these transliteration, I found a lot of errors, stuff that ain't even in the text, that they done added in there, family, on my own. So not only have I went and did with this old thing that they talk about, I can do the same thing you see them do, Reggie up there acting like they do. But I know that's not the proper way. So they be faking on y'all because they know y'all ain't did that research that I done did. So to them, what they doing, they doing it. And to those who believe that they doing it right, they believe in that. But me doing the research I done done, what I'm showing you now, I can see through them. And that's why when I present things to them and tell them to read it, you see they can't read it. You see? They can make it look like that to you, but I know better. So he said, unfortunately, I possess none of the qualifications necessary for such a great work, except in a very limited degree. Nevertheless, I have written this dictionary, and how I came to do so, it says the following paragraphs will show. So he telling you, at least E. Wallace Budge admitting that he don't know, family. Now watch what he say. He say when Champollion went to Egypt, he took with him both copies of his dictionary. When he finally made it there, while in that country, he added to both very considerably. Mr. Salvador, Cherubini, and Lenormand wrote many slips for him on, and these are basically those who was in the Coptic language. It says, and their contribution formed part of the original manuscript. On his return from Egypt, he continued his labors on the dictionary and added largely to it. So my thing is, where is Champollion's Coptic dictionary? That's what I want to know. So they showed also how when they came up with the concept of, determinatives, that this was adopted from Chinese ways of writing. So they took the measure that deal with what they call classifiers, in the language, And then they added in what they call determinatives. That's what they call them here. And they saying that these things, came from what they were calling equivalents of the phonetic symbols of Chinese text. They created they so-called determinatives. That's where they come up with that from. Egyptians didn't talk about no determinatives and rebus principle. The ancient Egyptians didn't even demonstrate. That's stuff that was originated recently. You see? That's what I'm trying to get y'all to see. The ancient ancestors didn't need no rebus principles. They didn't need no determinatives. That stuff didn't exist then. Not in the form that they talking about it. That's what the European is calling it today. All this English theory that you try to put on the grammatical expression of Kemet, trying to make it. Kemet didn't communicate like we communicate. And they'll tell you that if you look up the document that I have from the University of Chicago, the actual document on the Egyptian Book of the Dead is being revealed in hieratic. They'll tell you that most of the stuff that has been created later, the ancient Egyptian wouldn't be able to comprehend. They'd be like, what in the world is these people talking about? So it says to employ imitation of alphabetical order, an artificial alphabet founded upon the resemblance of characters to those of which phonetic value was clearly and correctly determined by the late Mr. Ackley. And it goes on and on. But want to give honors to the honesty of E. Wallace Budge for telling the truth. So here's some sources, family. I want you to do this research right here. The epigraphy of Ptolemaic Egypt, right? When you come over here, it says in France, however, John Francois Champollion was taking a different approach, focusing on the derivative relationship between the Demotic script. See, that's what he was working with. He wasn't working with no hieratic, people. There is no hieratic on the Rosetta Stone. And the hieroglyphs, by, in essence, reverse engineering from Demotic to hieroglyphs, he produced a hypothetical cartouche for a royal name of Cleopatra. Now you understand what's going on here. You see? And this is his so-called transliteration that's coming from monuments and relics that was created in 196 BC. They didn't exist from the time. I can see if the Rosetta came all the way from ancient Egypt 305,000 years ago, but this was created by the Ptolemies. And that's where you basing your decipherment on ancient Egypt off of what was created in 196 BC. Stop the madness, people. Stop it. Stop deceiving the people. You know what time it is. It tell you here in the same book. Well, this is actually this book, The Illuminating Osiris, the Egyptological Studies in Honor of Mark Smith. And you can actually go to this right here because I ain't playing with it. I ain't just showing you the source. I'll show you where I got it from. Google Books. This the whole book right here. And I went through it, read what was necessary to read, and then took what was necessary to be took out of here to give y'all some clarity. So let's go back over here. You see? So if you look, it says in Demotic, the link with hieroglyphs is more remote, as the script is not derived directly from hieroglyphs. There we go, body bag. It's not derived from hieroglyphs. So when they be telling you Demotic come from the Meduneda, Demotic come from, Demotic derives out of hieratic. It is possible to transcribe Demotic into hieroglyphs, but the exercise is of dubious value, and the results look very strange next to hieroglyphic spellings, largely because many of the later hieratic writings of words which directly give rise to Demotic writings are like group writing and orthographies mentioned earlier. You see? So it goes on, it says, thus the scribe of fad described above has somewhat paradoxically given rise to new word pictures for many words in late hieratic and Demotic, but not in hieroglyphic texts. This development is the logical result of the division labor among the scripts, the scribal tradition of writing used for everyday purposes, are generally literacy parts of company with that of the hieroglyphs, which are increasingly relegated to an academic tradition further and further moved from the olitarian communication. See, hieratic and demotic was used for day-to-day communication. This was the actual the language. The hieroglyphs or the pictures were not. This was the priesthood. You see, you can't speak pictures. Well, after Champollion did his decipherment, that's what they doing. But they really buried the true language under this nonsense of talking about they out here deciphering the metal netter. It says another facet relates to the language rather than writing. It says while late hieratic documents and demotic texts write an approximation of the language spoken at the time, the late hieroglyphic text often has their model. It says the literary language of the Old and Middle Kingdoms. The academic tradition of the hieroglyphs reaches its zenith in inscriptions of the Ptolemaic period, particularly in the temples which embody a mixture of self-conscious scholarly manipulation of the script, sometimes a markedly of what they call obfuscatory nature. It says in new values and signs and confusions which have come about because of phonetic change and inconsistencies arising from the incongruity between phonetic change and the archaic language which the texts attempt to reproduce. In these inscriptions, certain tendencies of hieroglyphic script can be exploited and exaggerated to the extent that they become counterproductive in terms of communication, consistency, recognizability, and being virtually neglected as guiding principles. Certain aspects of Ptolemaic orthography are a culmination of cryptographic writings. So they created cryptographic Ptolemaic hieroglyphs. So when they say that it's ridiculous to compare demotic to the pictures, this is what they're doing. This is Champollion chart right here. This is one of his chart right here, fam. See how he's comparing, the demotic letters over here. Many of y'all don't really know about demotic because y'all ain't studied it like that. Some of our people, we ain't gonna say everybody, but he compared this to these symbols. In other words, he was trying to choose which one of these symbols is gonna be best, to express the letter A. This is his actual chart. Now, this would be considered to him a Greek language, but we know this is a derivative of what they would call Coptic, but just Greek mixed, So anyway, so he compared the demotic to this letter here, that was considered Greek to them. We call Hecopti its original form, but he compared it here. Then he said, okay, well, we're going to use this as the letter A. Now, you know that this little chick, this little bird here is normally used in their particular right. I'm going to let y'all know how much Commission know about what they be trying to do over there. They be like, read the glyph, Commission. I know how to do that nonsense, but I know that ain't the right way. So this would be the letter W in today's chart that they done accepted as being a letter, right? But what is it doing up here with the letter A? Then they have another letter. They had a letter here, and this like the letter I to them. What is it doing up here? Here's that measure that actually has it. This is actually what they would call a triliteral right here. Erie is what that would be actually. You know what I mean? Some people, then they'll say, well, this is the sign R, another aspect of A. So they was guessing, family. This man put his own chart together. You could have did the same thing with the English alphabet. If I were to take English alphabet, replace this Coptic on the side, which is closely related to it, and I start writing in these symbols based upon the English alphabet that I put on the side of these symbols, and you use the English to transliterate it because you know the chart that I created, then I can say, okay, I done deciphered the symbols. Come on, man, that's crazy. And that's what they did to our people. That's what they did with the language. It don't take long to expose this nonsense, but we here to tell the truth. So here it is. This is the finish. and complete product of Champollion's alphabet again. And there you go. You see it. He put them same little birds up there. This is his draft. And then he eventually chose this to be the letter A. You see what I'm saying? He chose this to be another form of what he expressing as an A, but is also expressed in the form of an I. He chose this in the form of an A2, right? Then he chose this to be the I, you know, even though you got two of them here, the reed leaves, right? And they say this is I. These two dashes would represent the I2 to them in the Champollion. See, remember I told you this represents W because U is actually interchangeable with W. So you got to have all the knowledge of sounds. And this little swirl here is also another way of what they would say was W. That's how they teach it. I don't agree with that. This is Champollion's alphabetical chart right here. Now find me one that the ancient Egyptians demonstrated like this here. Then you can debunk what Commission's saying. But if you cannot produce a chart like this created by the ancient Egyptians before Champollion did this, oh, we got you. We got you, family. You see? We got you. Half of the people don't even know about what's called Saitic Coptic alphabet and how they came and remixed it, you know, coming from our ancestors. You see what I'm saying? Half of them don't even know it. You see it up there. Even our ancestors were the original inhabitants of the area they call in Greece today. They were there before the Eurocentric, got a Hyksos bloodline got up in there. Old Nubian alphabet. The Meroitic. This is the key to actually deciphering the Meroitic script. The Old Nubian alphabet. Most of this Old Nubia, which they like to call Greek, this is what most of your biblical scripture was revealed in. Old Nubia. That's you know, I ain't gonna get on nothing else though. I want to stick to the subject matter, you know, and deal with what we talking about. So when we get into the aspect and we start dealing with the Rosetta Stone and, you know, what's said here, now we can expose Champollion. After giving y'all the methodology, we showing it to you. Now what you do with the truth after we give it to you, it's on you. Let me see if anybody trying to get in there. Okay. You see? You can't speak pictures. That's right. You know? So we're not saying that they're not using this model. The Europeans are not using this model of what they're using with Champollion's alphabet. What we are saying to the people is that's not the way the ancient Egyptians demonstrated it, according to the classical writers. So I got a whole bunch of more up in here, you know, but I'm going to do it as a presentation, you know, maybe in the future. You know, it even go into how they created their font, you know, and being able to use it in books. You know, I got like 100 and some slides up here, 150 something slides, family. You know, it tell you what they did with the Coptic system and how they changed a lot of that stuff. You know, these are some of the things from the University of Chicago showing you that the glyphs and pictorials in true hieratic documents were just decoration. That's all they was, to decorate. They were more like captions. See, this is Anubis introduces the mummy of the deceased. This is the book of the dead, as they like to call it. We don't call it, we call it the book of coming forth by day, or coming forth by light. Cursive hieroglyphs are used for the captions around the figures. See, these are cursive hieroglyphs up here. You see? For the captions that are around the figures that are standing up here, right? It says, while spells on the papyri are written in late hieratic, which in this case has the Demotic translation below. So I'm going to show you what they talking about. This is actually hieratic. Being that I know the difference between hieratic, the Demotic is right here. It started right here. The Demotic started right here. And this is all hieratic writing up here. You know, and I can point out letters and everything in here. You know, P and R right there, for example. The letter H. You know, I can go all up through here. But this is more advanced to be able to go off into this. You know, to be able to go into, because of the way it looks. It's real primitive and it's hard to, you know, you got to be advanced to be able to go into that. But I can see the letters there. So what we find here, it says, and this is coming from another one of my sources. It says in 1784, at least it was so understood by Mr. J.D. of New York City, who in a letter to the editor published in February 1831 issue of New Jerusalem magazine praised Reed's article as remarked of hieroglyphics, such as their intimate connection with the doctrine of correspondences as revealed to us in New Jerusalem, that none but a new churchman would ever be able to thoroughly decipher them. So no doubt Mr. J.D. was referring to the portion of Reed's article which he discussed the class of signs called anaglyphs by Champollion. Champollion thought that the anaglyphs, because that's what we call hieroglyphs in my circle, anaglyphs, the analysis of those glyphs. It says, though connected with hieroglyphic writing, were not true hieroglyphics themselves, but rather symbolic pictures employing hieroglyphic-like figures. He backed up his contention by pointing out that most of the figures which compose the anaglyphs are accompanied by small legends in true hieroglyphic writing which explain them. But Reed, borrowing Champollion's phrases and reversing their meaning, says the anaglyphs are the true hieroglyphic writing, as shown by the fact that they have legends written in phonetic signs near them containing their signification. Reed adds, in spite of Champollion's discovery, these true hieroglyphs still remain obscure and probably will be so until an examination is made of them in a different spirit and manner and on a different ground from the present. In other words, what I'm demonstrating right now, that examination is going on right now. It said, if one of the points that the metaphysical and scientific schools of interpretation disputed was the relative value of simplicity and complexity, it is clear from Reed's article that another point and issue was the relative value of mystery. Implicit in Reed's doubt that Champollion's phonetic signs were true hieroglyphics was the traditional belief that the hieroglyphics must contain mysterious wisdom of the Egyptians. So they wasn't believing Champollion. You know what I mean? They wasn't believing it. So, man, I got a whole bunch more up here, but I don't want to, keep going over the same thing over and over again because it's redundant at this particular time. I know how people get it, but all these things here are coming from, these are coming from different expressions, of the ancient times where you had the real papyri of the Book of the Dead, and most of them were written. The ones that you see with the pictures on them, they come from mostly the Ptolemaic period, and a lot of these are more ancient, that have, and when you look at a lot of the hieratic with the pictures in them, the hieratic, you see all the holes in them. This real papyri right here, family, and hieratic. You see what I'm saying? This is real hieratic right here. Why y'all ain't been taught this by the Egyptian Egyptologists or the Kemetic community? See what I'm saying? Why they ain't pointed none of this out to y'all? It wouldn't seem so strange if they would have been teaching y'all this. You see? Man, this is terrible that our people being misled by this. It's hard to give it to them because they still want to believe, in what Champollion taught. It's a hard situation to give it to our people, man. They don't want to hear it. So this is where we really expose Champollion. There's an article that I have up here, and I'm going to bring it to a close after this article. Again, if somebody want to come in, we got the link there. You can get up here and speak your piece. We ain't going to cuss you out. We ain't going to kick you off the panel. We ain't going to try to control the narrative because you own our thing. We're going to let you speak. I'm going to show you how to demonstrate real decorum. You see? So here's the article here. In this article, that's right. Now, here we go. This is the question on Champollion finna be answered right here. Now, listen, this is coming from the WordPress. This is coming from the WordPress right here. This particular drawing. It's finna give you the background on Champollion, and watch this. It said, what has happened to the Champollion's Coptic dictionary and grammar? Because that will be the source that we need to use to prove his transliteration. How can we even prove that he deciphered something we can't even find his dictionary? It says Champollion in the Coptic language, cracking the Egyptian code, the keys of Egypt. It says Johanna Cheftici, and this is actually the Coptic priest, one of them that was, helping him at a particular time. So listen, it says, from early years, John Francois Champollion, 1790-1832, showed interest in Oriental languages. In 1802, at the age of 12 years, he started his formal education at the Abbey Dusseret School, and there he mastered Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Ethiopic, Arabic, Syriac, Chaldean. In 1804, he was attended, it says, in Lycée in Grenoble, and at 1806 he was admitted to the Academy of Grenoble after submitting his essay titled Graphical Description of Egypt Before the Conquest of Cambyses, right? It says, but his real entry into Coptic and hieroglyphic script did not start in earnest until he went to Paris in 1807 to study under Sylvester de Saussay. That was his teacher. De Saussay was one of the first ones trying to do what Champollion did. Sylvestre de Saussay, who was the first Frenchman who attempted to read the Rosetta Stone. It says the Rosetta Stone was created in 196 BC. Y'all know how far that is from, the beginning of what they give as the pre-dynastic period of Egypt. So how you going to create something later in 196 years before Christ, 196 years before Christ was born? That's how old the Rosetta Stone is. And then try to use it to decipher something that existed way before it. Make it make sense. The Rosetta Stone was created in 196 BC, representing a decree issued in Memphis by the Ptolemaic king Ptolemy V of Epiphanes, right? 204 to 180 BC. It was written in 2 languages and 3 scripts on the stone: Egyptian using hieroglyphic, Demotic scripts, top and middle respectively, and ancient Greek at the bottom version. It was discovered in 1799 in the town of Rosetta. It says by French. It says and was confiscated by the British. And after the French withdrew from Egypt under British pressure as a part of the capitulations, it says, of Alexandria in 1801, and was taken to London, where it now resides in the British Museum. Through the Rosetta Stone, Champollion was able to decipher the Egyptian hieroglyphs. He started his efforts in 1808, while Paris, when he began to study it from a replica. So he didn't even have the original Rosetta Stone. He started to try to decipher it from a replica. The original Rosetta Stone is so tore up you can't even really see it. And they got Europeans that done created their own alphabet over there in the Welsh. They say that they can decipher the hieroglyphs with the language in the Welsh. So they done decipher the whole book, of hieroglyphics, and they saying they did it in Welsh language. And basically they was going in on this guy here, Champollion, saying he was a fraud. But it says in 1824, he published his book, Precise du Systeme Hieroglyphique des Anciens Egyptiens, primer of the hieroglyphic system of the ancient Egyptians, opening the gate to the huge discipline of Egyptology and the study of ancient Egyptian history, literature, culture, and civilization. Champollion would not have been able to do so without prior excellent knowledge in Coptic language, which he described as the most perfect and most rational language known of all languages. He recognized the strong connection between Coptic and ancient Egyptian. It was at the Academy of Grenoble 1806 and 1807, at the age of 16 years, that he first started his interest in Coptic. And he was taught a bit of it by the Syrian Egyptian Dom Raphael the Monarchist. But it is during this period in Paris, 1807, 1809, that he was able to satisfy his thirst for Coptic. Paris was then the city to be in for all scholars after the campaigns of Napoleon Bonaparte had brought back to it monuments, manuscripts, books, works of art, and antiquities from diverse parts of the world, including Egypt. A lot of people don't know Napoleon also at that time took Western Freemasonry into Egypt. He was the one that introduced, Masonry to the Egyptians over there. But it says, much of his research was undertaken in the National Library. There, Champollion was privileged to gain access to the mass of foreign books that had come as loot, meaning Napoleon stole it in doing his campaigns. Now you got to remember, Napoleon, when he went into Egypt, he the same one that had scholars and scientists with him to create the Hermetic hypothesis and that old scientific racism, trying to make it look like the Europeans was the original Egyptians. This was Napoleon now. Keep that in mind. This is a key. It says, he set himself to study all the Coptic texts, most of which had been taken from the Vatican Library in Rome. Years later, when these manuscripts were returned to Italy, the English antiquarian Sir William Yale, 1777-1836, remarked, as to the Coptic and Champollion, I think that there are few Coptic books in Egypt, parts of Europe. I'm reading the doctrine together. It says that he has not examined. A very learned friend of mine told me there is no book in the Vatican in that language that is not remarks of Champollion in almost every page, which he made when the MSS were in Paris. It says, in Paris, Dom Raphael introduced Champollion to the Coptic priest, Johanna Cheftishi, the same person that I was talking about earlier, who left to France with the Coptic Legion, it says, of the general Yaqub, when the French withdrew from Egypt, and was serving at the church of Saint Roche on the Rue Saint in Horny in Paris, to which the Coptic immigrants went. Champollion frequently visited Cheftishi, it says, at his church, and spoke with him in Coptic in his attempt to improve his Coptic. In March 1809, he wrote to his brother. Now listen to what Champollion said. I give myself up entirely to Coptic. I wish to know Egyptian like my French, because on that language would be based my great work on the Egyptian papyri. He was telling you what he was going to do, that he was going to use the Coptic language, and this is how he going to deal with his so-called decipherment. When you can't do that, because Coptic is Coptic, Demotic is Demotic, Hieratic is hieratic. You see, you may be able to find some comparison in certain words, but you can't take a word that clearly evolved later and then actually say that you have accurately deciphered something that was more ancient, especially when you're trying to compare Coptic to pictures. That's the real bummer. It says, and a month later, he also writes, I only dream Coptic and Egyptian. I'm so Coptic, to amuse myself, I translate everything that comes to my head. It is the true means of putting pure Coptic into my head. After that, I will attack the papyri. He did attack the papyri too. he did attack the papyri, and our people been dead in the head ever since they've been reading that foolishness. It says, and thanks to my heroic valor, I hope to come to an end. I have already made a great step. It says, we must accept that Champollion, despite his love and appreciation of Coptic, regarded Coptic as an essential step for deciphering the hieroglyphic. His main aim was hieroglyphics, but in doing that, Champollion contributed to the study of Coptic, even though his effort in that field has not yet been made available to the world. It says, at that time, Champollion had some of the dictionaries and grammar written by Copts in the 13th and 14th century, when the Coptic was declining of Western writings. He had the grammar written by the German scholar Athanasius Kircher. And it says, Prodromus Coptus Civi Egypticus, which Kircher published in 1636. Champollion thought books written by the Copts were superior to that written by Kircher, but he was not satisfied by any of these. He decided to write his own Coptic grammar and dictionary. We want to know where it's at, though. They saying it exists, but where is that dictionary? So we can compare some of this to what he say he deciphered. We want to compare some of Champollion dictionary to that Rosetta Stone. It says Champollion found that existing dictionaries and grammar books of the Coptic language were inadequate. So while he pored over the text, he also began the mammoth task of compiling Coptic grammar and Coptic dictionary as a prelude to his hieroglyphic studies. In 1815, Champollion finished his monumental books of Coptic dictionary and grammar when he was in Grenoble. Bonaparte, Napoleon, had abdicated in the 4th of April of 1814, and the Bourbon monarchy in the person of King Louis, I want to say that is 18, was restored. Politics changed, and the Republicans, including Champollion, fell out of favor with the new regime. However, on the 1st of March, 1815, Bonaparte returned from his exile in Elba to the south of France, and then marched and occupied Paris, regaining political control. On his march to Paris, he met Champollion in Grenoble, and there Champollion told Bonaparte that he had just finished his monumental book on the Coptic dictionary and grammar. Napoleon held the same belief that Coptic was the key to hieroglyphic. He ordered Champollion to bring the manuscripts to Paris, where he would ensure their publication. So this is Napoleon that's going to help, Champollion with his publication of his Coptic dictionary. Champollion's brother Jacques Joseph took the manuscripts to Paris and handed them to the Académie des Inscriptions et Belles Lettres, Academy for formal assessment of prior to publication, right? They're going to proofread it. It says, but Napoleon's days were numbered. On the 18th of June, 1815, his troops were defeated in the Battle of Waterloo by the British and Prussians. He abdicated on the 22nd and exiled into Helena, never to return again. The monarchists, it says, include Champollion's previous teacher, Sylvester de Saussure, who took a certain dislike to Champollion, were in ascendancy now. It says, in the publication of Champollion's books was rejected by the Académie des Inscriptions et Belles Lettres on pressure by de Saussure, declaring that it was not worthy of being published at government expense. Champollion himself was exiled to his birthplace, the small village of Fingac. It says, there in 1816, Champollion completely reorganized and revised his 2 books. The dictionary reached more than 1,000 pages, and he was thinking of printing it in 4 volumes if he could. Now, de Saussure was one that actually said Champollion was a plagiarizer. He told Thomas Young, who was his peer, he said, man, you got to watch. You got to watch Champollion because he'll steal your work. So de Saussure, his teacher, said that he stole from him. That sounds like a familiar case that we dealing with now, right in the modern time. Dealing with myself in one. But it says the only way to make these books available, it says, to scholars in public was to publish them on Champollion's own expense, which was not possible considering his limited financial resources. And so, when his brother asked him to publish it, he asked him to forget the idea. So Champollion brother just said, man, forget about it. You ain't going to be able to do it. After Champollion's death in 1832, his brother persuaded the French government to purchase all of his brother's unpublished papers. A commission was set to consider the proposal. All the papers were moved to the National Library at Paris. And it says the Bibliothèque Nationale de France included the Coptic dictionary and grammar manuscripts, but they were again refused publication, this time by the commission. It says, to this date, Champollion's manuscripts on Coptic dictionary and grammar remain in the Bibliothèque. It says Nationale. It says in Paris, and they remain unpublished. So if these things remain unpublished, and he has a Coptic dictionary out there, and nobody has ever seen it, then how can you be sure that his unpublished Coptic dictionary that he used to deal with the decipherment is exactly what they say it is. We're dealing with conjecture, because right now, if I didn't show you all the stuff I'm showing, you're going to say, Commission, show me a source. Well, there is no source in case of dealing with this dictionary that they say he created, because it's unpublished. So how can you prove whether he deciphered it or not, other than just going off what somebody told you? Well, I just proved, that there was no decipherment when it comes to our ancient ancestors. I just proved that our ancestors dealt with metaphysics and symbolic interpretation of the pictures. So I proved my position from both standpoints. This is a great shame and a great loss to the world of academia. They may be outdated, they may be defective, but they cannot be without real value. What is more, they crying now. They were written by one of the best linguists and polyglots, a man who loved Coptic and thought high of it, a man who contributed to the science of Egyptology beyond any other man. They know not to post that, because they know if they ever post it and we see, the errors that's in that demonstration, it's going to debunk the whole paradigm of Champollion. That's why they won't show it to you. One hopes that Champollion's books on Coptic grammar and dictionary get published one day. It needs collaboration between researchers and sponsors. I do hope the cops would cover the expenses of the publication. So they praising him as being one, but now you see exactly what's going on with this situation. Now you shouldn't have no misunderstanding about this Champollion demonstration. These people have been misled and deceiving the people, and our people love to be deceived. That's why they like to attack Commission dealing with these special measures. I'm gonna let y'all hear something here, and I'm gonna tell y'all what it is, because I don't want to get my channel struck. It ain't gonna strike me and do nothing, but I want to make sure everything is right. And I have a lot of clips up here. I got a lot of clippings here dealing with a lot of this same stuff here. But I'm going to show you what somebody said. And this is one of the writers in that document where I was showing y'all the original Book of the Dead. A lot of Egyptologists are listening to this particular one. This is Forscalf. If you ever seen Forscalf, he's often quoted in this New Era in Time. I'm going to let you hear what he has to say about this Rosetta Stone. Watch this. Oh, we cold-blooded with this scholarship right here. We ain't even playing with them. We're going to always show you sources, and we're going to direct you to here's something that you couldn't understand, but you're going to understand it now. You are now witnessing the strength, a real scholarship. So hold up. Give me 1 second right here. I'm going to cover this up, and I'm going to give you his thing, but I don't want them to act like I'm trying to, hijack his content. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cover my screen real quick, and I'm going to play it. Let me stop sharing my screen. I'm going to reshare my screen, and I'm going to play the audio for y'all. And this is my last measure before I close out, just to give y'all this, because I want to make sure y'all get it. You know what I mean? I want to make sure y'all get the grand understanding of where we coming from. So let me share that, and I want y'all to listen now. Listen to what he say.
Summarize again, we have a decree of Ptolemy V. It's issued after the partial quelling of a revolt, and it gives benefactions to the priest, and in return, those.
He telling you what the Rosetta Stone is. He has up here that, when it was issued, 196 BC, but he telling you what this Rosetta is, this Rosetta Stone is about.
Summarize again, we have a decree of Ptolemy V. It's issued after the partial quelling of a revolt, and it gives benefactions to the priest, and in return.
Now, who was trying to revolt against Ptolemy is the question. It was the Nubians. It was the native Egyptians trying to take their throne back. So this alone should make you want to take this Rosetta Stone and throw it away, because this is dealing with him quelling a rebellion. How you gonna be rebelling against something that originally belonged to you? They took the throne of the natives. So here you go using something that they claiming to be a tool of decipherment, and this tool is being used as a decree to say, don't let them real Nubians come back up in here, y'all. That's what the Rosetta Stone dealing with. You know, y'all want to go at people, say the Moors enslaved the people, and then put a whole blanket indictment on the Moors, but y'all letting the European get away with using this Rosetta Stone that's actually talking about subduing our ancestors, and y'all praising it as a tool of decipherment. Shame on you.
And those priests are going to promulgate the Ptolemies with statues in the temples next to the god statues throughout Egypt. Now, as I mentioned, we actually have multiple copies of this decree, not just the Rosetta Stone. So the Rosetta Stone, which was found in the modern city of Rashid in Egypt, that was the first one discovered. But now we have the Nubaira stela that I showed you from 1884, a stela from Elephantine that was discovered at the beginning of the 20th century, and then a stela from Tel El Yahudiya that was discovered in 1922. These are all individual copies of the same decree from different places. So we have these different copies where they were put in different temples throughout the country. So the Rosetta Stone isn't even our only copy of the Memphis Decree. It's just our...
This Memphis Decree is just like a bill that was being passed in Congress, family. You know, it's basically just like COINTELPRO putting a directive out there on the Panthers and saying, we got to quell these Negroes, they rebelling, they trying to overthrow something. That's basically what this decree was demonstrated during the time of Ptolemy. And they learned well from their ancestors, didn't they? Now watch this. I got another thing that Ford finna say. Watch what he say. Check him out now. He gonna get deep. He gonna get deep into it. He just told you what the Rosetta Stone is consisting of, right? Watch this.
These decrees served as political propaganda, and it was part of their negotiation with the powerful Egyptian priesthood to increase their legitimacy throughout the country.
In other words, they had some sellouts, you know, that was basically putting these things out here in order to survive, to keep Ptolemy from killing them off. You know what I mean? They had to get with the narrative. In other words, you had some Judas goats back then. You had some rats, some turncoats among the priesthood. And most of them did it under duress. They were scared. You know, he came down. Y'all know how them barbarians demonstrate.
Right. Basically, the Egyptian priesthood were sort of the middle men, the middle group between the ruling house of the Ptolemies and then the Egyptian population. So this really served as political propaganda for them. These decrees served as political.
So this demonstration, this decree of Ptolemy, the Rosetta Stone, is political propaganda, you know, to basically subdue the native Egyptians, anybody that they consider trying to be rebels and take the throne back. Come on, man. That should be enough and say, oh, man, do not talk to me about no Rosetta Stone and Champollion deciphering nothing. Because they created it during their time. It was a propaganda tool. It was propaganda. What do people do with propaganda? See, y'all ain't never heard this. This ain't what they telling y'all. Commission, you know, done went and did his homework, family, on this stuff. You know, after this right here, it's on our people what they choose to believe. But I ain't going. I'm just telling you. That's why when you hear me speaking, I speak so sure of what I'm saying. Because I ain't just going off what nobody said. I done read countless books and had countless people saying the same thing. So when our brother Walter Williams say what he say about the metal netter not being deciphered, I didn't even know he was demonstrating that. But I honor the elder for that. You know what I mean? Because, you know,
one of the major
events the return of the ancient one
that the decree is celebrating is the quelling of a revolt against the Ptolemies in the northern section of Egypt in the Delta. In fact, there's revolts throughout Egypt against the Ptolemies. And so they were still ongoing at this time in the south. But this particular decree that's written on the Rosetta Stone is celebrating, at least partially, the quelling of the revolt in the north in the Delta.
Do you hear that? So it's celebrating the quelling. Y'all know quelling really means killing of the native Egyptians. So you celebrating a Rosetta Stone, you giving legitimacy to a Rosetta Stone that talks about our people being slaughtered by the Ptolemies, man. But you want to get on the Moors and say the Moors enslaved the people, but you giving Ptolemy a pass. Even though that stuff y'all talking about the Moors ain't even correct. It's the Moors been enslaved by the Moroccans, the Mauritanians being enslaved by Moroccans. So y'all cherry pick and accept what it is you want to accept because you racist against your own people. You got intellectual bias. You can't accept the truth for what it is because it go against your narrative. Commission gonna expose y'all though. You ain't got to give me a platform. I'm gonna put this truth out there. And I got writings on the way. Praise be to the Most High and the ancestors that I didn't write no material trying to build on that knowledge I was demonstrating with them hieroglyphs like they doing now. Because had I wrote then, I would have to recant what it is I'm demonstrating. See, that's their problem. They don't want to recant and admit that they're wrong. They making money off of taking our people on tours, telling them that they teaching them metal netta. So of course they ain't gonna admit I'm right, even though they know it. They writing books and done wrote books on this stuff. So they don't want to be like E. Wallace Budge and say, hey man, I was wrong. They'll rather deceive you and keep misleading you and call me pseudo. And if you fall for that, you're gonna believe that based upon what you thinking is the truth. And you ain't even did the research. So our people done been hoodwinked again. They done been run them up again. They done been led astray again. Bamboozled by our own people. Prophet Noble Drew Ali say, Moors, if you ain't careful, your own brother to try to put you back in slavery. And the worst form of slavery we suffer from now is mental slavery.
Part of the decree offers financial support for the temples, including increased priestly stipends, reduced taxes, amnesty for prisoners, etc. And in return, the Ptolemies are going to get basically extra cult veneration in temples throughout Egypt, where they're going to celebrate both the king's birthday and the king's accession day each month. So each month they're going to celebrate the day of the month when the king was born and the day when he took the crown, when he acceded to the throne.
Man, y'all hear that? So you got people getting paid. You know what I mean? They getting paid. Now these sellouts getting paid 30 pieces of silver. You know, they're getting paid for this demonstration. And in the end, Ptolemy, they got to venerate Ptolemy. So that's why on the documents, you know, a lot of them documents that Champollion come forth with, it's making Ptolemy a Nesut. You know, and that's what they did, family. They overthrew our ancestors, took the crown, took the throne like they always do, and remixed it. That's what they did, family. You know, we can't make this stuff up. We cannot make this stuff up, family. That's why our people so confused. You know, that's why they confused. So we're not going against the hieroglyphics. Our ancestors created hieroglyphics. We're just trying to show you the metaphysical formula that will be able to make this knowledge applicable to yourself. Because if you properly understand it and you understand gematria, if you understand that mathematics is a living language, and you understand you're dealing with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, when you're dealing with these signs and symbols, then you will understand how to heal yourself. You will understand that these are metaphysical measures that deal with formulas, mathematical formulas, family. You see? And had it not be for the ancestors, I wouldn't have been able to come into this knowledge, you know, of where I'm coming from with it. So I'm going to show you something real quick when I speak on it as formulas. Again, and I showed this to y'all already, but now it should make more sense. You know, this is one of the recent measures I brought forth, and I was showing our family, you know, this is the definition that you see them give for a word, right? This is coming from an Egyptian dictionary or modern Egyptologist, you see? But it goes into giving you the Unicodes, and it says the word is sway. It means to make endure, to last, to make stay in a house, lengthen life, last long, right? They say this is causative. Now, people will say, well, how do you get the word right here, sway, if it ain't been if it ain't been deciphered? Because the true document that they were using was dealing with hieratic. So what I did is I reverse engineered these symbols back into the hieratic form. So it would actually be hieratic that you would deal with, as the metal ray incomet is what hieratic is called. Sway, which is, you don't really have to put the majet there, and that's the majet. That's the scroll, as they would call it. You see, that's a thing. You see, these are all things. You see, these are all nouns. These are people, places, and things when you deal with the hieroglyphic script. So what you see here, I took the value from the hieratic and placed them here as Heka. This is the mantra that will activate the formula. What is this formula dealing with? How did I come up with the formula? Well, all of these letters, I took gematria and did mathematics, and it gave me the number 15. You see? Because for example, the root of the word, it means, according to the Egyptian alphabetical letters of the creation cycle, that's written by the brother Mustafa Gadala, a native-born Egyptian who was drawing from the works of Horapollo in the stanzas. That's where these breakdowns come from. The A is alpha. It represents the one and all, right? This is Heka dealing with hieratic. Not looking at these as alphabets. I'm showing you how to activate the formula. So it says the division, infusion, which is the letter H. You see, then we have the W, which comes from 1 plus 5, because the letter A represents 1 in gematria. The H represents 5 in the gematria. So when you add 1 and 5 together, you get 6. You see, so that's Aho, right? The way, that's the root of this word Swaha, right here, right? But together, these things mean the alpha, the one and all, the divine infusion, and connectivity between the upper and lower realms, right? So this is dealing with energy. And so in science, this deals with electrical conductivity with exactly 0 resistance. You see? And so we looked at this and went into, the atomic structure of what was being demonstrated here. 9 plus 6 is 15. That's the atomic mass of what is called beryllium and lithium. Both of these are energy sources. And they are normally said to be sources that are on opposite scales of energy. But them together actually produce electrical conductivity with exactly 0 resistance. And it has what we would call an eternal current in energy, right? That's what this formula is. This is an anaglyphic formula that was broke down, right? So this would correspond with the definition of the word: to make, endure, to last long, to make, stay in house, long, lengthen life and last long, causative, right? So what I did is took the words in our circle 7 and took every word that corresponds to this definition. So one of the words in our circle 7 in chapter 1, infinite, everlasting, from the past of never-ending days to come, everlasting life, everlasting retribution, everlasting gospel, a seed of everlasting life, boundless power, boundless space, vast estate, a long, long time, tarry longer, long ago. And it corresponds with the basic definition being given here, but it was originally given from hieratic, but they trying to make y'all believe they got this from symbols, when they know that they were using the hieratic, and they try to bury the hieratic up under these symbols, so you will be studying and looking for symbols, and you will never study the hieratic papyrus. And that's why the Kemetic community is behind right now. Not one scholar is teaching hieratic. So we reverse engineered the symbol back into the letters, because that's what they did. And these symbols don't mean nothing outside of, when they talking about an alphabet, they ain't got nothing to do with no alphabet. They are metaphysical. So we broke it down. We applied the values here, and this would be actually the Heka. These would be the word expression or sounds of power. If you meditate, you can activate this type of energy. But that's on a whole nother level right there. I can give a whole bill on that if I wanted to. And if you think that it's a game, family, I done did this more than one time. I showed y'all this right here dealing with the name, that they call Yahweh. You know, I showed you how this really represents a formula that actually deal with the God code in the elements, you know, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and so forth and so on, going into dealing with God eternal within the body. You see? And I use the same different aspects of being able to come up with my anaglyphic formula. So this is where I'm at with it. So I see these things on a mathematical level. That's why I'm talking about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You see? And so in our teaching, we say the everlasting gospel is a saving power that comes from the great God through our ancestors, our ancient forefathers by his prophets. You know what I mean? So, I mean, we can go on and on and on. You see, I touched the periodic table here as well. You see that nitrogen, you have your oxygen here, then you have your hydrogen atom. You see? I mean, we can go on and on, family. Y'all gonna see more, but I ain't gonna expose everything, you know, because I got to keep some of this for what I'm right. See, the ancient Egyptian origins of making dua to Allah. I showed you that the word Allah even came from Kemet. They didn't want to accept that. I proved that. This is a formula right here. You know, so, man, you know, I'm going to just end at this particular time, but I want to thank our family, you know, for listening, because we have greatness. Our ancestors did great things, and I hate for people to try to diminish them and just make them something that's so small. You know, they trying to make this stuff like, you know, it's small. So now you see when I say Rosetta on Rosetta Stone on trial, where's the primary source of decipherment? You know, where is Champollion'S Coptic dictionary? How can you prove that his dictionary was used to decipher it if it ain't never been published to the public? Make it make sense. How? And that's why you see right here going across the bottom of the screen in closing, you know, exactly what I said, because that's exactly what happened. Look at it. I said the true meaning of most of the ancient Egyptian papyri that has been passed down to us has been lost in so-called Greek translation. And I just proved that with everything I put up here. Remember, I got 150 slides, and I ain't even showed y'all all of it. I got 150 slides, family. And now I'm going to show you one of the methodologies I use to vet my words, though. And I showed this before. What I use is languages that borrowed words from Kemet. For example, the Hebrew word Ab, which is father. Before this word existed in the Hebrew, we can see a Kemetic connection here. So I would be able to say, okay, this is a borrowed word. I can confirm that word, right? As being true. This is my vetting system that I use. If a word does not have, you know, an equivalent, then I would consider these words pure Egyptian and accept them with a grain of salt. So I go over here now and I deal with the word in Arabic, you know, which is also Ab, you know, and you have a bone, you know, which is father, right? So this is the same as the Hebrew and the same as the Kemetic here. That's how I'm vetting this. This is how I'm checking what Wallace Budge brought forth. But he actually put the Hebrew here and the Hebrew here. He didn't put the Arabic there. Abu, fathers, grandfathers, parents, ancestors. So, okay, I can accept, you know, this is special measure. Remember, he didn't do this by dealing with symbols. He was dealing with Demotic and Coptic. So we see the Coptic equivalent to the Arabic, basically, and the Hebrew. You know, we can do the same thing with this word, Nabi, which is dealing with spokesman, speaker, prophet in the Hebrew. From Nabah, inspired man of prophecy. Nabi derives from Nabuat, which means to be high. This is the Arabic aspect of it. But when you go into the Kemetic, this would be the equivalent. Nebu, Neb, because Lord is actually synonymous with one that would be considered a prophet. So Neb as Lord would come into the Hebrew as prophet, a Nabi, Neb, a Nabi. You see, this is called sound shifting and this is called borrowing. This word ketem in ancient Kemet, which means the seal, to seal up, to close up. See, they're telling you it's Coptic right here, right? So it corresponds with the Hebrew word kata, which means to seal, to affix a seal, seal up. This is how I vet words. You see, I call them strong words if they correspond in the Coptic, the what they call the Hebrew and the Arabic. This is how I do my vetting with words. So it says Katamin Nabi'in. This means Muhammad, the seal of the prophets. So when people think seal of the prophets mean that he the final prophet, it just simply means that he has the stamp and authenticity from the creator. Meaning if you don't believe he a prophet, the Most High put his seal on it. See, to seal up, to close up, shut up, imprison, to finish. Merketamu, overseer of the keepers of the seal, keeper of the seal. And I'm not looking at these pictures because I know this is Coptic behind the pictures. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not concerned with these pictures they put up here. So you say, Kamisha, why are you using it? I'm using it because this is Coptic. These are pictures here. So anyway, you know, then it goes into ketamine. You know, it just breaks down seal being a stamp. This word exists here before it came in the Arabic in there. So this is my vetting process. The word leba, inner man, will, a heart, leb. In the Islamic, this is Hebrew up here now. This is the Arabic, qalb, which means heart. It says that it actually is the origin of intentional activities, the cause behind all humans' intuitive deeds. While the brain handles the physical impressions of qalb, the heart is responsible for deep understanding within the sadr, or the chest. The heart and brain work together, but it's the heart where the true knowledge can be received. It's not talking about the blood pumping organ, it's talking about your consciousness. That's why we say, who is Allah, the Father of the universe? Can we see him? No. Where's the nearest place we can meet him? In the heart. That means he's in the consciousness. So we go to Kemet, and let's see what they say about this. In root is Alb. And it says that it represents the heart and soul. It dictates the heart, desire, the heart's desire, the middle, the interior sense, the wisdom, the understanding, the intelligence, the attention, intention, disposition, manner, will, wish, desire, mind, courage, lust. This is dealing with your thoughts. You see? Ab, another word is Amen, a God. Where's the nearest place you can meet God? Allah, the hidden one. Amen means the hidden one. Hidden within you, within your consciousness. You know, but that's how I vet words. If they don't have them correspondence, then I will consider them purely Egyptian or purely Coptic and accept them with a grain of salt. But this is the work that Commission do when it comes to dealing with this stuff. You know, so it's just a grand drawing to have our people here and to give them the true family. You know, we ain't gonna never give you no misinformation. We're gonna always give you the truth where you can go and look for it yourself. You feel me? Now, what ones do with it after that, that's on them. You know what I mean? Whether they choose to accept it or reject it, all is well. You know, but nevertheless, family, you know, and this is one of them quotes I was telling y'all about, this coming from the Circle 7. When you deal with them hieroglyphs, it says, the master said the logos will give heed to what you say. It says, no man can enter into the light till he has found himself. Go forth and search till you have found your own soul, and then return. The guide led Yahushua, the neophyte that was being initiated, to a room in which the light was faint and mellow, like the light of early dawn. The chamber walls were marked with mystic signs and hieroglyphs and sacred texts. And in the chamber, Yahushua, the brother y'all call Isa Jesus, found himself alone, where he remained for many days. He read the sacred texts and thought out the meanings of the hieroglyphs and sought the import of the master's charge to find himself. A revelation came and he got acquainted with his soul. He found himself and he was not alone. So this is what I'm talking about. It's telling you that he pondered upon these meanings and he sought the import of the master charge to find himself. So the meta-netta led him to the knowledge of himself. You see? So we just wanted to bring all of that to our family, and y'all got to look it up, man. They really did a botched job, you know, on trying to make everything Ptolemaic. All this Ptolemaic right here. Y'all know good and well that ain't our ancestor right there. You know, it ain't even funny, but you know, these people literally went and look at that. Y'all know good and well that is not our ancient ancestors, family. You know good and well. Hold up. Sorry about that. Y'all heard that, but you didn't see it because I closed it up. But y'all still got the gist. Let me do this right here. I'm going to take this off. Let me do this here. I'm going to take this off real quick. And then I'm going to show y'all what I was just showing you. Just the pictures. That's all it is. So you can see my screen. Pardon self. But all the other stuff that I was giving, that was good from mouth to ear. So these are the pictures that the Ptolemies created. You know, the different statues they came up with after they infiltrated Kemet. They completely remixed it, family. They did our people dirty. They did them dirty. This is terrible. So, you know, I got to close out now because I got a class. I got to open up. But at this time, family, I just want to say peace, love, and law at all costs. It ain't nothing but love divine always coming from me. And I'm going to see y'all on the next drawing, family. You know, y'all just stay tuned. We're going to keep bringing y'all this truth. And it's going to always be the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So, peace and love, family. You know, if y'all would like to come forth and listen to some of our conference calls, you can come forth, you know, on our website. Go to moorish-american-government.land, you know, and then go to the bottom of the screen. And when you get to the bottom of moorish-american-government.land all together, you'll see our call-in number, you know, 609-746-1180, 609-746-1180. And the check-in to the extension is actually 639-381 #. You can also go to the playbacks as well. So I'm going to close this demonstration out so I can open up, you know, our conference call. Peace, love, and law at all costs, family. Ankwajet Seneb, life, health, and prosperity be upon you all, you know, and the peace of the ancestors I give to you. Peace and love. Shimotepu.